always starts the same way. A slight tone shift, a word too sharp, a glance too cold. And suddenly something erupts, not outside, inside. Like a spark hitting dry wood, tight chest, burning throat. Thoughts tangled like wires. You try to contain it, to breathe through it. But it's already there. The sting, the heat, the weight. By the time you realize, you've snapped or shut down, or replayed the moment in your mind 100 times, rewriting every line you wish you'd said. Why does it hit so hard? Why does something so small feel like a personal attack? Why does a stranger's carelessness feel like betrayal? You tell yourself it's nothing, but your body knows better. Your nervous system lights up. Your shadow flinches. Carl Jung didn't sugarcoat it. What irritates us in others is often a mirror. Not a mirror of who they are, but of what we've buried. We think we're reacting to them, but we're not. We're reacting to the part of us they accidentally uncovered, the wound we thought was healed, the voice we silenced long ago. That childhood memory still echoing in the background, that belief that we are not enough, still whispering under our skin. So we chase peace. We meditate, we mute, we scroll, we pretend, but none of it works. Because peace isn't about silencing the world. It's about facing the storm inside. You see, the people who trigger you, they're not enemies, they're messengers. Carriers of a truth you've been running from, the truth that your pain didn't disappear. It just changed its mask. If someone makes you feel invisible, maybe it's because you've spent years trying not to be seen. If they make you feel small, maybe it's because you've never truly claimed your space. And until you turn toward that pain, it will keep choosing your reactions for you. This isn't about becoming numb. It's about becoming aware. And that awareness, it doesn't come from avoiding your anger. It comes from listening to it. Ready to keep going. Then keep listening. And then it strikes, not the words, but the echo they awaken. That old aching wound of invisibility, maybe from childhood, maybe from yesterday, it flares like a match on dry skin. And it hurts, not because of what was said, but because of what was touched. This isn't their fault. It's your signal. Anger is not dysfunction. It's intelligence. It speaks in tension, in heat, in rupture, but only if you dare to listen. The question isn't, how do I stop feeling this? It's what in me is screaming to be seen. Because that's the truth. You're not reacting to this moment. You're reacting to all the ones that came before, the ones you survived in silence, the ones you buried to keep going, the ones that still live in your nervous system, in your breath, in your chest. Jung called them complexes, emotional ghosts that hijack the present with unresolved pain. Every time you're triggered, you're not with this person. You're with the one who didn't protect you, the one who laughed when you cried, the one who taught you that being small was safer. So now you armor up, or disappear, you fight, or freeze. Not because you're irrational, but because that old version of you still believes the world is dangerous. And in many ways, it was. But you're not that child anymore. You don't need to destroy or retreat. You need to understand. Because anger, when translated, becomes a compass, not to punish others, but to locate yourself. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Most people don't want that kind of peace. They want control over others, over chaos, over discomfort. But control is just fear in a suit and tie. It looks strong, but it's hollow. Jung knew the enemy is not outside. It never was. It's the part of you still waiting to be heard. So next time you feel the fire, ask it, what are you trying to show me? Where do I still ache? What part of me is begging for attention? Because no one can make you angry. They can only uncover the parts of you you've refused to meet. And now, maybe it's time to meet them. It's never just about what they said. It's how they said it, the smirk, the timing, the way they look through you, as if you were invisible, as if your presence were a disruption, as if your voice didn't matter, and something in you ignites. Not because they're powerful, but because they remind you of something you thought you buried. Jung once said that the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there's a reaction, both are transformed. But transformation requires awareness. Most people don't want awareness. They want someone to blame. You say they're arrogant. But maybe it's because you were punished every time you spoke with confidence. You say they're emotionally distant. But maybe it's because you fear your own dependency, the way you cling and ache and overgive. You say they talk too much. But maybe it's because you were taught your silence was your value. We're not annoyed by what's foreign. We're pierced by what's familiar, unclaimed, buried, disowned. This is the shadow, the version of yourself that was labeled too much or not enough. Too dramatic, too sensitive, too selfish. So you did what every wounded soul does. You buried it. You became the opposite. Stoic, pleasing, quiet, controlled. But here's the truth Jung exposed. The shadow never dies. It waits. And when someone walks into your life wearing the mask you've repressed, it erupts. The rage you feel toward them is not rage. It's memory. Memory in disguise. Let's say you've built yourself around balance, calm, maturity. Then they enter, loud, demanding, impulsive. And you boil. But what if it's not them you hate? What if it's the ghost of you that once wanted to be loud, too? The child who cried too hard, the teenager who slammed doors, the adult who still trembles when they take up space. Those people who trigger you most. They're not enemies. They're messengers, walking flashbacks of your unlived self. Jung didn't teach us to cut these people out. He taught us to sit with the reaction, to follow the thread back to the wound. Because only by facing the shadow can we stop being puppets of our past. And maybe, just maybe, learn to reclaim the parts of us we were told to hide. Because the trigger isn't the problem, it's the teacher. Your reaction is the real classroom, the place where truth whispers and illusions burn. When you stop pointing outward, you start digging inward. You begin to see that the power others seem to hold over you isn't real. It was granted, handed over by the parts of you still waiting to be healed. You feel small not because they diminished you, but because your sense of worth was borrowed. You feel rejected not because they left, but because you tied your identity to being chosen. You feel defensive because a deeper voice inside still believes you must earn your place. But the moment you turn the gaze inward, everything changes. You stop reacting. You begin to reflect. You ask, what wound did this moment just awaken? What story did I attach to their behavior? Was this about them, or about a forgotten part of me asking to be seen? Jung never said the shadow must be destroyed. He said it must be integrated, and integration is the art of staying present when everything in you wants to disappear. When someone disrespects you, you set a boundary, not to punish, but to protect your clarity. When someone leaves, you don't collapse into despair. You let them go without turning their exit into a reflection of your worth. That's mastery, not coldness, not detachment, but presence, integrity. Imagine it. You're sitting across from someone who used to twist your insides. Their words are the same, their tone the same. But something in you is different. No flinch, no panic, no need to explain or fix or flee. You see them. But more importantly, you see yourself. And that fire that once burned your chest is gone. Not because you're numb, but because you're no longer fragmented. They touched nothing you haven't already faced. They awakened nothing you haven't already embraced. This is individuation, the slow return to wholeness. And wholeness means no longer being owned by your projections. You don't need the mirror to lie anymore. You've made peace with the reflection, and in that peace, anger transforms into vision, into power, into quiet, unshakable self-possession. And then it happens, the test. A crowded room, a sharp comment, a dismissive glance, the old triggers now powerless. You don't tense, you don't chase, you just breathe. And that silence inside you, that stillness, is your liberation. But this time, you don't absorb it. You hear the tone, you feel the shift in the air. But it doesn't sink into your bones like before. You're not suppressing anything. You're not pretending it doesn't hurt. You're just not giving it a throne. That's not coldness, that's freedom. This is what Jung meant by integration, not perfection, not emotional sterilization, but the courage to face your inner war and stop pretending it's someone else's fault. Most people think peace means never feeling. They chase stillness by amputating parts of themselves. They call it strength, but it's just anesthesia. They build masks, numb smiles, polished calm. But inside, still chaos. Jung shattered that illusion. Real peace is not the absence of emotion. It's the presence of self. It's owning what's inside of you so thoroughly that the world loses its leverage. It's not that others stop being rude, cold, sarcastic. It's that you stop outsourcing your emotional safety to them. You want to stop getting triggered? Stop trying to fix the world. And start meeting the parts of you that keep handing the world your power. Anger is not your enemy. It's a flare, a distress signal from the depth, saying, "You've abandoned me again." You gave them the keys again. And here's the path back, not control, not revenge, but integration. What does that mean? It means you stop dividing yourself. Stop being the good one while burying your resentment. Stop being the strong one while hiding your tears. Stop being the Zen one while swallowing storms. Integration is radical honesty, not with the world, with you. You say, yes, I feel small sometimes. Yes, I crave attention. Yes, I want to scream. Yes, I get jealous, insecure, needy. And instead of shutting those voices out, you sit with them, not to fix, not to shame, just to witness, just to hold. Because that's the alchemy. Jung taught that wholeness doesn't come from purity. It comes from contradiction, from the sacred tension between your light and your shadow, from embracing the chaos inside without letting it define you. That's what makes you emotionally untouchable. Not that you've conquered your pain, but that it no longer owns you. Someone throws words at you, and you don't flinch. Not because you're superior, but because you've already looked at yourself and didn't look away. Someone can ignore you, and you no longer spiral. Not because you don't feel it, but because you no longer mistake absence for abandonment. You no longer beg silence to speak your worth. Someone can walk away, and the ground beneath you stays still, because you've finally returned to yourself. That's the difference. Most people don't want emotional strength. They want escape. They want immunity. To build a life where nothing hurts, where no one can reach in and shake what they barely know how to hold. But that isn't mastery. That's paralysis with a polished face. That's trauma dressed in discipline. True power is different. It's raw, it's silent, it's not loud or dramatic. It's the stillness that stays when everything else is falling apart. It's feeling anger rise and choosing not to burn. Feeling rejected and choosing not to collapse. Feeling misunderstood and choosing not to explain yourself to people committed to not hearing you. That's sovereignty, not coldness, not detachment, but rootedness. Jung never said, become untouchable. He said, become whole. And that means you stop asking, why are they like this? And start asking, why does this shake me? Every emotional trigger is an invitation, a crack in the mask, a doorway into the rooms of your psyche you've left locked for years. The rooms where your wounded child still waits. The rooms where your rage sleeps. The rooms where your need to be seen still cries in the dark. You want to stop suffering. Stop outsourcing your nervous system to strangers. Own your pain. Name your story. Not to get stuck in it, but to stop being ruled by it. Because when you've walked through your own fire, no one else's flame scares you. You stop reacting, you start responding, you stop defending, you start discerning. You don't chase closure, you don't beg for clarity, you simply see, without needing to be seen back. And then it happens, the moment where the world pushes, and you don't sway. Not out of resistance, but presence. That's not numbness. That's integration. It's not that pain disappears. It's that it no longer defines your center. And in that stillness, you realize they can't trigger what you've already healed. That is the freedom no one can give you, and no one can take away. You're not angry anymore. Not because you've silenced yourself, but because you no longer negotiate your worth. They ignore you, and you don't collapse. They mock you, and you don't shrink. They forget your name, and still, you remember who you are. You don't explain yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. You don't hand over your voice in hopes someone might validate your silence. Because now, you don't react. Not out of pride, out of clarity, out of sovereignty. Carl Jung said, I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become. And once you choose to become whole, you stop offering fragments of yourself to people who only ever saw pieces. You stop depending on applause. You stop fearing rejection. The insult that used to hurt now lands on solid ground, because you've reclaimed what they once touched, the ex that once hollowed you out. They become a name without weight, the friend who overtalks you. You don't feel small anymore, because you no longer need permission to be loud. That co-worker who once made your blood boil? Now they speak, and all you hear is noise that no longer belongs to you. They didn't change. You did, not by force, but by coming back. To the part of you once abandoned to be liked. And here's the shift. You used to live in reaction, now you live in truth, in alignment, in connection with yourself. You're not seeking to be untouchable. You've just stopped offering your wounds to people who won't hold them. You don't need to protect your identity when you've made peace with who you are. Carl Jung didn't teach you to be happy. He taught you to be whole. And wholeness doesn't mean the absence of anger. It means understanding what your anger was pointing to. Discomfort isn't failure. It's information. Triggers aren't enemies. They're messages from the part of you that finally wants to be heard. And when you listen, not with fear, but with presence, the screaming softens. People will still misunderstand, still reject, still mislabel you, but their voices won't stick, because you're no longer made of surfaces. You're rooted, and nothing personal can touch the one who's no longer performing for approval. You're not harder, You're clearer, you're not colder, you're cleaner. And that changes everything. That's the final freedom, not indifference, but intimacy with yourself. Not the absence of pain, but the presence of power. The kind of power that doesn't shout, doesn't posture, doesn't need to be seen. Because it already knows it exists. You walk into a room, and their looks no longer define your reflection. Their tones don't pierce your skin, because there's no opening left to exploit. Your walls aren't defenses anymore. They're architecture, built not to keep people out, but to keep your truth in. You don't collapse when they forget you. You don't shiver when they raise their voice. Because you're no longer asking the world to love you into existence. You've stopped searching for validation in broken mirrors. What if the pain wasn't an interruption, but an invitation? What if every trigger was never a curse, but a compass, pointing you home, not to who you pretend to be, but to who you were before they taught you to fear your own fire? Jung didn't study psychology to fix people. He studied the soul, the raw, trembling parts we bury to survive. And he left us a warning. What you do not bring to consciousness will rule your life, and you will call it fate. So ask yourself, how long will you keep mistaking your past for your personality? How many more people will you give the power to wake your wounds? You've seen it now. It was never about them. It was the echo, the unclaimed, the unconscious. And when you bring light to that darkness, it stops controlling you. The anger quiets, not because the world changed, but because you finally did. You stopped defending, stopped performing. You made the choice to live from the inside out. So now I ask you, are you willing to look at the part of you that still needs to be loved, not by them, but by you? Are you brave enough to stop blaming and start becoming? If something in this stirred you, subscribe to Beyond the Shadow. Not to follow another voice, but to deepen your own. And if you're ready to leave your mark, type in the comments, "I no longer borrow my identity." That phrase will tell me you didn't just watch this, you felt it, you're walking it. Welcome to the edge of yourself, where shadows no longer haunt you, because you've made them part of your light. You feel it now, don't you? That shift, that silence, not the kind that comes from holding your breath, but the kind that comes from finally exhaling. You've stopped waiting for them to change. You've stopped needing the apology, because you gave yourself what they never could, understanding. You no longer confuse distance with punishment. You know now. Some people had to walk away so you could walk into your own mind, your own voice, your own roots. They didn't fail you. They revealed you. Every rejection pointed to a place you hadn't claimed yet. This is the real awakening. When the noise around you loses its grip. When the storm doesn't stop, but you do. You stop spinning. You stop reacting. You stop confusing their chaos for your identity. You stand. Not taller, just truer. Carl Jung called it individuation, but it's more than a word. It's a quiet rebellion against every lie you believed about needing to be smaller, softer, quieter. You see your shadow now, not as the enemy, but as the piece that was missing. You don't need to be anyone else. You just need to be whole. And when you become whole, you no longer chase clarity. You are clarity. You no longer fear the reflection. You've become the mirror. So the next time someone tries to shake your center, remember, you built it from pieces they couldn't break. If this stirred something inside you, like this video so others can find it when the world feels too loud, and if you're tired of shrinking, tired of explaining, tired of pretending you're fine when you're on fire inside, subscribe to Beyond the Shadow. Because here, we don't perform peace. We embody it. We don't avoid the trigger. We study it. We don't abandon ourselves for love, silence, or validation. We return home, fiercely, softly, completely. And if this truth found you at the right time, leave a comment below. I'm not reactive. I'm rooted. Let that be your flag. Let that be your turning point. Because the world doesn't need another calm mask. It needs your grounded truth. And now, no one gets to tell you who you are. Because you've seen it. You've felt it. And finally, you've chosen to become it.